Good afternoon. Thank you for joining our Tuesday webinar. I'm Yomika Bennett, Executive Director of the New York Charter Schools Association. I'm joined by Susie Carello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, David Frank, Executive Director of the Charter Schools Office at NYSID, and Jelly Matos, Executive Director, Policy and Operations at New York City Department of Education, Aaron Cochran, Managing Director in the same office, Laurie Hazeley, Senior Director, Charter Authorizing and Accountability at New York City DOE, and Corey Callahan from the New York City Charter Center. I want to let everyone know today that many of us on the webinar today at New York Charter School Association and Susie and David are in upstate New York, where we are under a tornado watch until 9 p.m. So we are fingers crossed that our power will hold out and that you will continue to see us and is giving you a visual of what may happen to us. So we hope that we will keep our connection up, but bear with us if we do have technical difficulties. Today we will follow our usual format. I'll share a few updates. We'll hear from updates from David, Susie, and Laurie. We'll field some outstanding questions from last week, then take questions from the Q&A before turning to New York City DOE questions. I want to let you know that unfortunately Christina Coughlin, the Assistant Commissioner of the Office of School Governance, Policy, and Religious and Independent Schools, whose office oversees transportation for charter schools, was not able to join us today as planned. We will host her either at a separate and specific webinar focused on transportation issues and questions, or at next Tuesday's weekly webinar. So for a couple other previews of coming attractions before we dive in, please join us this Thursday at 4 p.m. for the next Race, Justice, and Equity conversation with charter educators. Do not miss this. It should be a very good, lively, and informative discussion. I hope you join us, and I hope you take part in our discussion. Next Thursday, August 13th, also at 4 p.m., we will host Mackie Raymond, along with the state's authorizers, to discuss the recent Credo report on New York charter activities during the first months of the COVID crisis. We are also thrilled to announce a partnership with Google Classroom for a distance learning workshop on August 17th from 1 to 5 p.m. This session will help schools as they work to convert their work to fully remote and or hybrid learning. Google recommends that each school send academic leaders and technology or operational leaders. Please note that you must register in advance for this workshop. We will paste a registration form into the chat. In addition, tomorrow the Senate Education Committee will host, that's the New York State Senate Education Committee, will host a roundtable on education and health guidance for reopening schools. That will be from 4 to 12:45 p.m. online. If you're interested in watching, we're dropping the link in the chat. As always, if anything of note comes out of discussion, we will let you know. And finally, for New York City schools specifically, the Chancellor's Parent Advisory Council recently hosted a Q&A on school reopening that has been particularly recommended. It is available at the link. We are dropping that in the chat as well. The best content starts about 30 minutes into the 2-hour recording. Check it out. Now, diving in, David, Susie, and Laurie, welcome. We'll start with you, Susie. Do you have any updates?
Apologies. Just want to underscore that looking forward to the Credo presentation. Thank you all again for all of your hard work in getting the surveys done. Want to also thank so many of you went ahead and put the answers to our requests. I've started submitting them into Epicenter. Thank you so much for that work. They're not due until the 14th, but we really appreciate the lifting on all of that. And tomorrow, I believe all of the schools that are on deck for renewal at SUNY next year, tomorrow morning is the webinar that the fabulous Jeff Wasbus and our evaluation and academic accountability team are going to be presenting. So we look forward to seeing you guys there. That's all I have. Yomika, I'm checking to see if I'm frozen or you
Sorry
are.
about that. I'm already having technical difficulties.
That's
David,
okay.
now we'll jump to you. Do you have updates for us?
Sure. Well, thanks, Yomika. The only update I have is first to thank all of those schools who sent us the Office of General Services PPE uh, uh, supply survey. It'll help the state ensure that we're ordering the PPE that we need. For those schools who are interested in ordering PPE through OGS, it's actually a two-step process, and so there's a little confusion. But first, schools need to be registered with OGS, and I'll put a link on how to register in the chat. Once you're registered, and actually many charter schools, over 100 charter schools are already registered, but make sure you're registered. Once you're registered, you can then email OGS and get in contact with them about ordering. The link, the email address to contact them with similarly is in the chat. So some schools have had some frustration that they'll reach out to OGS and not be able to order because they're not pre-registered. So make sure you follow the instructions at the link first and then email OGS. But I'd be happy to take any questions about that. And with that, I'll turn it over to Laurie.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My only updates are that I'm excited for the Credo webinar next week, and my colleague Anjali will be stepping in as the authorizer because she did all of the work while I was out on that. So I'm really happy that Anjali will speak to the DOE as authorizer for that. For charter schools, DOE authorized charter schools going through renewal. We have our webinar on Thursday, so I will see you all then. And those are my only updates. Thank you.
Those baby noises are the cutest.
Thank you. I'll take a video from here on. Thank you, though.
Well, Laurie, adorable.
Thank you.
Yumika, if you're having internet issues, let me know if you want me to dive into the pre-planned questions. Unless I'm also having internet issues and I don't know it.
No, I'm back online. So turning questions now to the questions received in advance. David, we're going to start with you. Can you say a little bit about the K through 12 Rethink grant? In particular, are charter schools eligible?
Yeah, so first I'll say I'm so excited about this grant. We actually, 39 states applied and only 11 got funded. And New York was one of the 11. So that was really exciting. States like New Jersey and Florida that applied didn't get funded. So that even, I think that makes it even more interesting. But the Rethink grant is designed to help support schools as they transition from brick and mortar to remote instruction and to help fund professional development around that transition. We know that professional development budgets across the state for district charter non-public schools are under strain. And so we hope that these funds will help supplement that. However, the money is actually not going out to schools directly. Rather, the money is going out to, for the first year of the grant, to your regional information center. So whether it's New York City in New York City, or the Winnie RIC out in the Buffalo, Western New York area, or your RICs, they in turn will be providing the professional development that all teachers can be a part of, including charter schools. And we actually wrote that specifically in the grant. In year 2 and 3 of the grant, we're then going out for an RFP to create modules where, similar to the DASA workshop, teachers can go and they can get credentialed or micro-credentials rather, or a certificate on teaching remotely or blended learning teaching options. So it's something that your teachers might be interested in doing at no cost to them. But unfortunately, the money isn't going directly to schools. We're also planning on having an advisory group, and we will make sure that charters are represented on that group as well. So very exciting, but unfortunately not exciting for your bottom line. You'll be notified of these PD opportunities as the RICs start providing the services in September and October.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is regarding the extension of the executive order that allowed flexibility with open meetings law. Has anyone heard any updates on that? I have not heard that it has been extended at this point. Any rumors, updates?
Similarly, I know that the former executive order expires today. I similarly have not heard of any updates. However, we do know that this is on the governor's radar, and in the past we've seen the new executive orders extending the waiver come out either the day of or the day after the previous executive order comes out. So I'd say stay tuned. We did reach out to the executive regarding this to let them know how important those waivers are to schools and boards in particular as they navigate through the pandemic. But if you do have a board meeting that's scheduled in the next few days and you're wondering how to proceed, I would recommend that you reach out to your authorizer, whether the legal team at SUNY or your liaison at SED or DOE for further guidance.
Okay, thank you. The next question is regarding contact tracing. What are school-specific responsibilities regarding contact tracing? And if you don't have specific responsibilities, if you can give us just an understanding of what are the high points that schools need to meet in regard to contact tracing. And we'll start with anyone who wants to start.
Well, Ralph and I talked about this today. So first and foremost, you submitted a plan through DOH that discussed how you were going to both organize your school and interact with your local Department of Health. So first is follow your plan. Second is that many of you, this is a word that has taken on new layers of meaning, but many of you are going to pod or cohort your students, or at least that's part of the plan when they are back in school. And so ensuring that you've got good information about where in your building they have been, who they've had contact with, and being prepared with all of that in a way that you can get to your local DOH people, including their personal contact information, whatever DOH is asking for, then you can facilitate and support them. I think it will be a matter of each local DOH and having that relationship with your school. So your responsibility is to chat with them. Somebody has a few things that they learned. So there might be an expert lurking there in the chat.
I would just add that page 41 of the NICEAD reopening guidance does mention the requirements for contact tracing, and that actually is pretty closely aligned with the information on contact tracing in the DOH guidance that was put out as well. But basically the responsibility of schools is to assist your local health departments in tracing all contacts of any individual at school in accordance with the New York State Contact Tracing Program protocols. And so unless that differs from your reopening plans, that's the guidance that you should continue to follow.
Okay, great, thank you. Laurie, do you want to add anything?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, thanks. The next question is about stakeholders. Stakeholder consultation requirements for Title I funding applications the same as, i.e., should charter LEAs conduct virtual consultations prior to submission of the Title I application at the end of the month? So the question is, are stakeholder consultation requirements for Title I funding applications the same as usual before the end of the month? I'm going to move to the next part of the question is, will charter schools be required to hold an annual Title I parents meeting in 2020 if schools partially or completely remote for all of September?
Those are very good questions, Yumika, and I reached out to our title office here at SED with those very same questions, and as soon as I get an answer from them, I'll be sure to pass it along to the association so that you can share it with schools.
Okay, perfect. Next question is about the Regents. Is there a timeline for the June 2021 Regents examinations? When was it, in terms of when they will be released for us?
The State Education Department is working very closely with the Board of Regents to explore that very topic. But unfortunately, at the present time, we think it's premature to release a schedule. And I would just keep your eyes and ears open as the school year begins. As is required by SED's reopening guidance, the standards that you're teaching your students should continue to be taught, whether or not there's Regents exam administration this coming academic year or not. Remember, for schools to qualify for those Regents waivers, you would have need to have met the requirements of the course. Students would have had to meet the requirements of the course that's affiliated with the Regents exam. So Regents exam or not, that shouldn't change the academic program that you're providing to your students.
Okay, excellent. And the last advanced question we have is, will there be any flexibility in the number of professional days for teachers versus instruction days as part of the 180-day requirement?
Well, David, you can talk about what the Regents opportunity flexibility is, but just, you know, a note, right? Charters are under the 990 hour instructional, I don't know what the word is evading me, requirements for your students. So I'm not quite sure how to answer that question, but maybe David has some insight into any relief that the Regents might be able to provide.
Yeah, that's another question that I posed, and I don't have an answer yet, but as soon as I do, I will share it so that we can bring some more clarity to that.
Okay, thank you. That completes all the questions I received in advance. We're going to turn it now to you, Anna, for the Q&A.
Great, thanks. So I'm going to start off by totally hating on Google, which is fun to do because they don't normally get hated on. We're actually very thrilled and honored that they reached out to us to offer their Google Classroom workshop. But the registration link that they gave to us, which we gave to you, says July 17th. And it is actually, for everyone who's clicked on the link and has the bonus points, it's already following up on it, August 17th. So if you clicked on the link or haven't, the date is August 17th in the afternoon from 1 to 5. Highly recommend. This is something that they're offering in limited capacity, if you will, across the country, and super helpful in terms of a variety of resources, tools, techniques, in terms of online resources and things like that. So lots of questions have already come through from folks who've wanted to sign up for that. So brownie points to you all, but the date is August 17th, so be aware. I also want to flag for folks in general, you know, we've received some questions over the months about using the Q&A. Many of us are monitoring the questions as you submit them, and in many cases are typing answers. So if you submitted a question and you don't hear it asked, be sure that you're checking in on the Q&A because a typed answer may have presented itself. So Bryson asked a question about updates on the one-time Senate appropriation for FY 19-20. I think what he's asking, and so I'm going to sort of asterisk it for a top question that I know is top of mind for Corey from the Charter Center, is the New York City specific bullet aid from 1920 that would typically have been already have been paid out in June or July. Bryson, if I'm wrong about your question and you're asking about, for example, federal funding, which is still very much a work in progress, please feel free to correct me in the chat or in the Q&A. All right, so David, I think this next one is for you about specific guidance for administration of the NICETEL for students who are in remote learning. So I know that many of the initial evaluation timeline requirements have been waived, but is there more specific guidance around that test in particular right now, or is this also something that is DOE might have more insight into?
So I do want to address that previous question, though. I'm sure everyone on this call is a voracious reader of budget bulletins that come out from the state. But if you are interested in those aid payments are, I would just refer you to Budget Bulletin B1223. I can provide a link in the chat for that. But that's always a good place to start. Regarding the, and here you go. So regarding the NISATEL, I will reach out to our Office of Bilingual Ed and World Languages to get more information. I feel like that's been my refrain for many of these questions, but I apologize. I will seek out some more information regarding the NISATEL administration.
Great, thanks. And so then David and others, folks continue to ask questions and be concerned about this question about being in a hybrid model or 100% remote and the implications for funding. And so I actually think that there are two questions embedded in there. One is about regular enrollment and the other is about special ed services. So could you potentially each speak to your current understanding of the funding implications or guidance of schools if they are not fully in person in terms of billing and payments, both for regular ed students, but also special ed students?
So regarding general education students, at their July Board of Regents meeting, the regents did extend the waiver of instructional hour requirements for the 180-day requirement for state aid purposes. And so you can go back and look at the regulatory changes from the July meeting. And actually, I've been sharing a lot of links, so I might as well share this one too. So you can see that that PowerPoint presentation in the chat. Regarding special education, we did put out a memo a few weeks ago regarding special ed funding for the 2019-20 school year. We're working very closely with Anjali and the New York City DOE regarding an update to that memo. My general understanding is that, and working with other stakeholders at the State Ed Department, that the information in that memo will hold true for at least for now, in the 2021 school year. We don't know what the future will hold, particularly regarding the pandemic and the course of the pandemic, but whether or not we'll have to go back, or whether or not we'll go back to full-time instruction in person later on in this academic year. But we anticipate that while the instructional waiver is in effect, that guidance will remain constant. So more information to come on that.
And can I maybe sneak in and frame Susie and Laurie's answers, and then David, ask you if you want to circle back. Knowing all of those things, which is somewhat of a like, we know a little bit, but we don't know everything, what guidance would you give? So how are you documenting and ensuring that a student is legitimately included on a core aid invoice, whether they're regular ed or special ed, in particular if they're not showing up to school in the typical every single day mode?
Well, it depends on what the instructional program being offered is. So for example, if schools choose to only have an in-person instructional experience for students during the academic year, and students, because of a variety of factors, don't attend that program, then normal procedures for students not attending your school would apply. If schools are providing a remote instructional opportunity, pursuant to to both, everyone's guidance, whether it's DOH, SED, SUNY. There are requirements for keeping attendance. And so you need to ensure that students are participating in that program one way or another. And that's why record keeping is so important. If there's a hybrid model, then at least I'll speak for Board of Regents authorized charter schools. If there's a hybrid model and the students are participating remotely and not through the in-person component of that model, and there's no opportunity for the student to participate one way or another in the in-person instruction, whether it's sitting at home watching a recording of it, or whether there's some type of supplementary support being provided, then schools should have an attendance plan in place for that. I wouldn't imagine that schools would be able to mark students as present if there is an in-person component to a program and students are not participating in some type of remedial instructional, I shouldn't say that. As long as you shouldn't be able to mark a student as present if they aren't participating in some type of instructional activity that the school has developed in order to supplement or allow students to participate in the in-person activities, even if that participation is remote. So I hope that's as clear as mud, but if you give me some time to think about it, perhaps I could be more articulate. But in general, I think that would be our guidance.
So we've been asked.
Thoughts?
Oh, I don't know. Laurie, you want to jump in? I'll jump in and then let you go. I'm sorry, I know you're managing a young one and I'm probably not being a very good colleague in helping you do that. So, again, right now, we're getting schools plans in. Ours aren't due until the 14th. We left some of that time frame in, hoping to understand in greater detail what will come out of the governor's office this week. But at the end of the day, if your plan is to have an opportunity for students to be remote, to be blended, to be full-time bricks and mortar, when the bricks and mortar opportunity is there with all of the DOH requirements that you've already made your plans for, what we've said is make sure you understand how you're going to count attendance in each one of those situations. And make sure you let us know how you're going to account attendance in each one of those situations. And David, I thought there was something in the NYSID, in the Regents guidance, you are much better at knowing where it may be than I am, that also talked about keeping up attendance and what the attendance requirements were. So one of the questions I saw was someone is planning a 4-day-a-week instructional model that will accumulate to the number of hours that you are held accountable for accumulating. I'm assuming whoever put that question into the chat also has a strategy and a plan for counting attendance of those students. And so that's what SUNY is going to ask for, with the caveat that, things could change. There might be additional opportunities under some executive order during the year that my crystal ball isn't telling me now. But we will certainly work with schools on that flexibility. But I do think, David, the more information we can get about how billing will be considered countable, credible, across the state, we'll be able to guide the schools better. So if you can get us any more answers on that, that would be great.
And so thank you, Susie. There is a whole section on attendance.
Yeah.
In the SED guidance, as Susie said, it's on page 81, and there's the link in the chat. But it does talk a lot about having flexibility, and that there should be considerations made because students might not be able to make it to an in-person program. However, the important thing, and I think Susie would agree, is you need to have a plan and a procedure for collecting attendance. I think the very worst thing you can do is just not take attendance, or take attendance but not in a uniform way. You need a definition of what does to attend mean for your school. And I would also agree with Susie by saying that schools have a lot of flexibilities in terms of how you can deliver your instruction. So as I mentioned before, the waiver of instructional hour, there is a waiver of instructional hour requirements that the regions passed at their July meeting in the regs. And so you could, theoretically, you can provide all of the instruction on one day. If you go, 24 hours a day, 24 hours, you can provide that instruction. But if you, I know a lot of our schools are going maybe remote for students in cohorts. They're doing 2 days of remote instruction for some students, 2 days for others, and then Friday is an intervention block. Certainly you have that authority to do so. Just make sure that that's what's in your plan.
And if I could just add from the association's perspective, and my personal guidance, sort of connect the dots on what the authorizers are saying before I hand it over to our colleagues in New York City. If this is a change in any way, and it probably is, from your otherwise attendance policy that's probably in your student and family handbook, update it. And it might be worth actually calling it out as a separate policy and being able to document that you have shared it out to families who are participating in anything other than the typical environment that is anticipated by your student and family handbook. And in particular, if you are located in a district where the district might make an issue of any of your student billing, being able to attach that policy with any documentation of the equivalent student's participation that aligns with that policy, should questions be asked about either student enrollment or engagement. So for example, I know some of you were asked by your districts of residence back in the spring to establish what student participation looked like or what your remote learning programs look like. And while that is not specifically required, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so if you have a policy, document it, communicate it, and then stick it in your back pocket for when the hater's gonna hate. That's the association perspective. So on that note, love to hand it over to our friends in New York City, Corey and Anjali. There are some questions in the Q&A that are teed up for you guys, and I'm sure you have some New York City specific questions that folks are anxious to hear the answers to.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Yes, there are lots of questions. I did want to start, though, actually, because there's been a lot of documents released in the last week out of DOE. And I know there's a lot of paper to read. Admittedly, I haven't combed through every letter myself, but we did want to start by bringing attention to some of these documents, and I'm going to use Anjali to help me kind of explain and then talk a little bit about what is to come, because I know whenever there's more guidance documents released, there are more questions. They seem to just breed more questions. So let's start with I think the first announcement we saw late last week out of DOE, and I just want to make sure all the schools on this call know, is that schools are not going to be able to, in DOE co-located space, reopen in person prior to the DOE opening. And I think everyone saw the language used in that memo said prior to the DOE opening. There was not the date. Anjali has already informed me, but we do not have a DOE calendar, but I will just ask Anjali to speak to, is the DOE still working towards a September 10th reopening of the DOE building so that schools can kind of use that date to plan around, understanding that, things can obviously change tomorrow. So we'll start there.
Hi, Corey, and hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. So Corey, the DOE is still working to finalize the first day of school along with the calendar. So I know that we are working on it and expect it in the next few weeks.
Okay. So no answer to that. We'll all just keep thinking of September 10th because that is what we've all been working for, but appreciate that that is not anything official out of DOE. There also were several health and safety documents that everyone should have received, I believe, late Friday night. One was what DOE actually submitted to the state, the Department of Health, for their July 31st submission, if you were interested in reading that. Then there were two other documents. One was the COVID-19 school health policy, which I think for a lot of co-located schools, there were probably things brought up in that document about health screenings, what to do with staff, that you have questions about. And there was also a document about the guidance on entry, dismissal, circulation, and use of public assembly space in DOE buildings. So those two documents really hit mostly on co-located schools. There's obviously some stuff on the safety and health that we know is still outstanding for all charters. But Anjali, can you tell everyone what folks should be doing if they have questions about those two specific new documents and guidance policies that were announced?
Yeah, for sure. So Corey, I just put a link in the chat. This is our reopening Google Doc, or Google form rather. And we're encouraging schools to, to submit the questions in this Google form so that we know what's an outstanding question or what needs to be clarified. We are working with our colleagues across the DOE to have office hours in the next, through the month of August to clarify or explain these documents. We're hoping that we can do something this Friday, but it's still being confirmed. So look out for an email from us. But in the meantime, if you can submit your questions in the Google form I put in the chat, and we're asking that you submit that by the end of Thursday, I believe. Let me just confirm. Yep, by the end of Thursday. So that we can be ready, Corey, for an office hours on either Friday or Monday, still TBD.
Got it. So I'll just reiterate, as you know, the Charter Center also collects questions. So I always send lots of questions over. Some I receive from you, some I just come up on my own. Please feel free if you want to reach out to me to share your questions. I'm happy to send them over as well. But yes, we do want to make sure they get over. I want to just call out, because I think it's very important to know that there are different departments in DOE who are making decisions now on part of these guidance. So it's not just a call with DOH. Tracy Agerton, who we will continue to have calls with as we get more guidance, especially on the Trace and Track program, which I know schools are still waiting on, versus, a lot of schools are joining the facilities office hours at 11 a.m. on Wednesdays if you're in co-located space, but Tom Trackow and his team don't always have all the answers or making all the decisions on some of the other aspects of the school reopening. So it really is important to make sure we get all these questions fleshed out so we can get the right people to answer. And we appreciate you guys bearing with us as we set up lots of Zoom Q&A sessions, but we figured this is the easiest way to disseminate. The Charter Center is also taking notes during these sessions, and we'll send out updated note links when we have them for the different sessions if schools haven't been able to meet it. And then the last set of guidance, Anjali, if you could just touch briefly on, is the DOE guidance for paraprofessionals for charter schools.
That's right, Corey. So that was released, I forget when, yesterday maybe.
It was yesterday.
Yesterday, yes. So this guidance is applicable to FY21, and we're gonna be going through this in the next special ed office hours next week.
Got it. Okay. Some questions we've been getting. Schools in co-located space are having issues getting access for staff trying to enter buildings during the summer. And that might be that schools are having issues with the actual janitor or security guard when they come to the building. How should charters escalate issues of access to the building?
Got it. So can I just clarify one thing, Corey, before I answer?
Sure.
So one clarification. So if you're a school leader, and I know that for charters, this means a couple of different titles. This may be your AP or your principal or your director of operations. You should be able to access DOE buildings, except, the COVID testing ones, and that's a whole different set of guidance. But you should be able to access DOE buildings by just emailing your custodian, giving him the heads up, and just making sure there's nothing going on in the building. They don't need safety they don't need to coordinate safety for leadership to be in the building. We know that there are some schools that are facing issues with this. So if you are having an issue with a custodian and he's not able to articulate a good reason as to why he's not letting you in the building, just send us an email at charterschools@nyc.gov, and we can escalate in our office. The second set, Corey, is the guidance for just regular school staff, teachers, counselors, whatever. There are up to 12 people that can access the building, and you have to fill out the building access request form 48 hours in advance. Now, we're seeing a lot of denials because schools are filling out the form, a day in advance, for example. And that's an automatic denial because we have to coordinate safety in the building before we can allow you in. So that's the first clarification, Corey. If there are any other issues that are surfacing, custodian is not letting you in, for some reason you're not hearing back from your safety director, escalate to our office, and we're coordinating directly with the head of the office to support with this process.
Great. In terms of access to free and reliable internet, I know this is an issue that a lot of schools are concerned about as we go into a blended learning, and a lot of charters, especially if they're starting remote now, because DOE buildings are not open until September. Has DOE been able to work out any arrangements with any of the city internet providers that could assist families during this time?
That's a great question, Corey. We'll take that back. We'll take that back with us, and let's put it on the list for next week.
Okay. Also, I think we always get these questions because they're very important to all the schools. Any updates on the busing situation for the fall? And then, of course, the nursing, because those are two services that charters rely on DOE for.
Mm-hmm. So no updates yet. No concrete updates. I'm going to say the same thing on repeat, Corey. So
okay.
Until you hear from us on a concrete plan for bus service for next year, we do advise that, for schools to plan, some contingency plan in case there isn't service available. And Erin, remind me, but we did send an email to schools that are either new or have a moving site or a new site. There was a deadline about a week ago or so that schools needed to complete a form to ensure that they were, to complete the form to get MetroCards or to get bus service when that happens. If you miss that deadline, please reach out to our office right away, because we're coordinating with OPT to ensure that your school is covered for MetroCards and for bus service. This applies to both. And Erin, let me know if I'm missing anything there, because I know we're still missing some schools.
No, you're not missing anything. And I would just take this opportunity, if you are a school that has not yet given us your lease for a new site, or you're still waiting for a certificate of occupancy, that is going to delay our ability to provide you transportation. So if you are not, if you need assistance, I'm not sure what we can do on our end, but just keep us in the loop on that documentation, because the sooner we get that, the sooner we can arrange for all of the services.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to follow up on the nursing issue, because Anjali, we've been hearing from some schools that they have been getting calls about their medical room sufficiency. So getting calls from either their nursing coordinator or contact. If a school has not received a call about this, is there someone they should be reaching out to, or is there anything you can tell schools about that process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Corey, we're actually working with the office that oversees nurses, and we're getting ready to send an email to all schools about nurses for next year. So I would say hold off on emailing. That's not required at the moment, unless your borough director, has reached out to you. So just sit tight. Okay.
And then I know you have special education office hours, but one question that we keep getting, and I do just want to take in front of the whole sector, is are schools going to be able to still access related services remotely this fall for students?
And Corey, is your question specific to students that are in a remote setting?
It has been sent to me not in that fashion, but you could answer it for that if that makes you feel, if it's easier. But I think I would like the answer to both, of like a child who is in a blended learning situation versus I guess I was assuming if they were all remote, it would probably be allowable, but if a student is in a blended situation, so they're coming into the building, you know, a couple times a week.
Got it. Okay, so I think there's a larger policy question here, Corey, that we're still evaluating internally. But I do know that, you know, as you know, the DOE will also have a hybrid model to some extent. And so there will be some related services that will be provided remotely. I don't know that we're at a point, Corey, where we can answer the question of whether schools can opt in to all related services, you know, to teletherapy overall, you know, for both in-person and remote learning. So more to come. We're hoping to have more of an update in office hours next week.
Great. And then before I move to a couple questions I see in the Q&A, I did just want to raise and say out loud, I know that schools have been asking, and someone even asked in the Q&A about the DOH contact. And so for right now, you know, just so schools know, like all the DOH contact is really going through the charter school office at DOE. So if you have questions or issues health related, like please make sure you get them to Anjali or myself, and I can get them to DOE as we continue to work on these issues. I know two big questions that have been on everyone's mind, one for a couple weeks, one for a few days. The first is about the DOE's daycare seats that are going to be available at some level across the city. Charters have been asking if they are going to have their students will be able to be part of that program. I know the answer is still I don't know, but I did just want to call it out that it's something that we are looking into and working with the DOE to see if there's a way to make charters able to have accessibility there. And then the other big issue that came up late last week is about teachers receiving priority access to testing at the city sites. A lot of you have also reached out directly on that question. I'm sure you've also reached out directly to Anjali. Just so everyone knows, those are questions we don't have an answer to today, but top of mind and hoping to get a resolution very quickly so that schools can plan accordingly. Moving on to the Q&A, I see we just have a few questions to clarify. So the first is, how do we escalate other facilities issues? And I assume that was, Anjali, after our conversation where you went through the two scenarios of if people were having access issues.
Mm-hmm. This is for the building access request form. Email our office. So here, if you're having trouble with your BSD, with the safety director, if you're having trouble with the custodian, feel free to escalate it to our office. So charterschools@schools.nyc.gov. We work very closely with the safety directors, and typically a quick call or email with them usually resolves it. So if you haven't done that, please do that before escalating to our office.
Can you describe how school food will work with buildings operating partially remotely? Will sites from the spring be meal sites, and will they be available to any city, to any family, sorry?
Yeah, we're actually working, we're coordinating with our colleagues at the school food office to join us in the session that we're hoping to have this week, if not next week, to answer those questions, Corey.
Okay. Clarification on the facilities issues. What if you have ongoing construction, which impacts safety protocols? Who should they reach out to then? Thank you for the clarification.
What do you mean, Corey? I need more details to answer that.
So I just dismissed it. It was, sorry, no other facility issues like ongoing construction which impacts safety protocols. This is a follow-up to who should they contact if they're having access issues to buildings.
Okay. And I see this is coming from Ali. Ali, let's connect offline. I want to understand like what the construction is, if it's something that, you know, where we can have people in the building. If it's lead remediation, likely not. So let's connect offline.
And then the last question I have is, will there be parent Metro cards in the event that we do not have busing?
That is the $1 million question, Corey. I don't know.
I guess that depends on how many Metro cards and how much they cost. Can you tell I've been doing some summer work with my kids?
There you go. Awesome. Corey, anything?
And I think that's it. I do see another question from Natalie on the in-person related services, but I think that's a question I'll let you either answer in the chat, Anjali, or address in office hours, just because it's pretty specific for the guidance. With that, I can turn it over. I know, David, you put something out there. I don't know if you want to say it out loud.
Yeah, just so everyone knows that, you know, Eastern Suffolk BOCES for the New York City charters are, you know, a great resource. But because of the storm, they're being hit with extremely severe weather, and they're actually, they need to evacuate that area. So unfortunately, you know, our thoughts are with them, and we hope everyone is safe. They won't be available by phone until 11 a.m. tomorrow. But of course, as you would expect from us large bureaucracies, reports are still due today by midnight to preserve a school's ability to review and make corrections prior to the final deadline next Tuesday, which is August 11th at midnight. So reports will be accepted up until the final deadline on August 11th, but if you do want to preserve your ability to review and make corrections, it needs to be submitted today. You know, if you're trying to reach Tracy Davey and her team, my recommendation is probably to reach out to my pal Erin Cochran at the New York City DOE.
Happy to help. And I should say there's a little bit more time too for the June Regents waiver. So if that is what you are concerned about this evening, you have a little bit more time there.
Great, thanks, Erin.
Hey, Erin.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to just do a reminder on the SQR office hours?
Yes, so related to data reporting, so we are doing the school quality report, and I'm sure a lot of folks are trying to finish up state reporting before you plunge right back into the school quality report. So we are holding office hours. We have shared them in the P Weekly. The next one is August 13th, and we are strongly encouraging all New York City charter schools to submit that data. So please join us for that office hour and let us know if you have any questions. We are collecting some additional items this year for those public Find a School reports that we know families find really valuable.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. I do have one more question for folks from New York City DOE. I have a question about building access issues, and the question is this. Is there guidance out there, are staff authorized to access the buildings to do the hybrid teaching, et cetera, without their students either before the schools open in September or also during the school year? Or do they need to, is that also an issue that needs to be escalated to the email?
Jamika, if I'm understanding your question correctly, so in advance of school opening, or in advance of DOE school opening, no more than 12 people can access a building. So, you can't have full staff PD or any prepping, et cetera, happening in advance. During the school year, I think that schools will have access to their space, of course, on a limited basis, because we can't sort of go over the limited capacity or the revised capacity numbers that were shared.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I got that clarifying question. I figured I'd ask it before we hang up today. And with that, it wraps for today. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay dry, and we'll see you next time.
See you Thursday.
We'll see you again. All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.